Welcome to Hungarian Insights, your go-to channel for exploring Hungary's rich history, vibrant culture, and language learning resources. What do gold-covered churches, forbidden poems, and Finnish grammar have in common? Hungarian culture, of course. Let's dive in. In this episode, we explore how European influences, from the Renaissance to Romanticism, shaped Hungary's unique cultural identity. From Baroque cathedrals and heroic epics to national awakenings and musical innovation, we'll uncover how Hungary absorbed, transformed, and redefined what it means to be part of Europe, while staying distinctly Hungarian.
Welcome to our deep dive into Hungarian culture. We're going to be talking about how European culture influenced Hungary's own vibrant traditions. You're particularly interested in the Baroque era. There's a lot to uncover.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot to uncover. And Hungary's story is so fascinating because it's constantly absorbing these waves of European trends, but while still holding on to its unique identity. It's like, adding new spices to a classic recipe. The core flavor is still there, but it becomes even richer.
That's a great way to put it. I like that. So let's set the scene a little bit. We're talking about Hungary, obviously, a nation right in the middle of Europe with this long, layered history, intertwined with its neighbors, but always distinctly Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting with the Baroque period.
Yeah, the Baroque era. It's all about drama and excess, intense emotions. You can almost think of it as the go big or go home period of art and architecture.
I like that. Go big or go home.
Imagine walking into a church and you're just surrounded by gold, elaborate sculptures, and paintings that just explode with emotion.
That's quite a visual. It sounds almost overwhelming.
It was meant to be. The Baroque was all about awe and spectacle, about stirring your soul with religious fervor and artistic grandeur. And in Hungary, this style found fertile ground.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of the European Baroque sweeping across the continent. How did Hungary make it its own?
Well, let's meet a key player, Miklós Zrínyi. He was both a poet and a military leader.
Interesting.
Which I think really embodies that Baroque mix of artistic passion and real-world action, his epic poem, The Peril of Sighet. It isn't just a great example of Hungarian Baroque literature, it's a window into the mindset of the time.
What's so special about this poem? Why should our listener care about it?
It throws you right into the heat of battle, defending a Hungarian fortress against the Ottomans. You can practically hear the clash of swords, the cries of the soldiers, the desperation of the defenders. And the language is so grand, sweeping, almost theatrical. And it captures that Baroque spirit of high drama perfectly. But here's the really interesting part. This poem, written in the 1600s, was rediscovered in the 18th century and became hugely influential for the Romantics.
Wow, so it's like a cultural time capsule, connecting two very different artistic movements across centuries.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about Zrínyi's work that resonated with the Romantics, do you think?
Well, his themes of heroism, intense emotion, and national pride, these were very much Baroque. But they also spoke to those core romantic values that were emerging later on. It shows how artistic trends can kind of echo through history in surprising ways.
Yeah, for sure. Makes you realize that history isn't just a straight line. It's more like a web of interconnected threads. But while Zrínyi was capturing the drama of war, another Hungarian figure was making waves in a very different arena: religion.
Right. We can't talk about the Baroque era without mentioning Péter Pázmány. He was a Jesuit priest known for his powerful writing and sermons, a key figure in the Counter-Reformation, which was basically Catholicism's pushback against the Protestant Reformation.
So lots of religious and political upheaval happening in Europe at that time. How did that play out in Hungary?
Pázmány was really instrumental in reviving Catholicism in Hungary. He was incredibly persuasive, both as a writer and a speaker, and his work really helped to shape religious thought and even influenced Hungarian culture and politics. It shows how deeply intertwined religion and culture were during the Baroque period, not just in Hungary, but across Europe.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating how these individual figures like Zrínyi and Pázmány can really bring a historical period to life. But the Baroque era didn't last forever, did it? As we move into the 18th century, the Enlightenment started to shake things up.
Absolutely. New ideas about reason, progress, and individual liberty, they were sweeping across Europe. And in Hungary, this sparked a growing sense of national consciousness.
Okay, so we've got this new intellectual movement influencing Hungary, but how did they balance that with maintaining their own distinct culture? That seems like a tough act to balance.
It was, and this is where things get really interesting because you can see how Hungarian intellectuals grappled with this tension
Yeah.
between these European trends and their own unique identity. They were absorbing these Enlightenment ideas, but they were also asking, what does it mean to be Hungarian?
That's a big question. How do they start to answer it?
Through literature. In the 18th century, critical writing in Hungary was heavily influenced by this idea called historia literaria.
Historia literaria.
Yeah, and it came from German Protestant universities. It's fascinating because at the time, early Hungarian literary encyclopedias included authors of all ethnicities and languages within the Kingdom of Hungary.
So Hungarian literature wasn't just about ethnicity. It was about a shared geographical and cultural space.
Exactly. It reflects what was called the Hungarist identity. Being part of the Kingdom of Hungary was the unifying factor. But things were starting to shift
What kind of shift are we talking about here?
towards more focused definition of Hungarian literature. In 1808, a scholar named Samuel Pepys published a book called Knowledge of Hungarian Literature, where he coined the term national literature, nemzeti literatura in Hungarian, and focused on works written specifically in the Magyar language.
So the emphasis was shifting from a broader Hungarist identity to a more distinct Magyar-focused national literature.
Exactly. And this shift is crucial because it sets the stage for the explosion of Hungarian Romanticism in the 19th century.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. I can't wait to see what happens next.
This shift toward a Magyar-focused national literature really set the scene for Romanticism to, take root and flourish in Hungary. And what's really interesting is how this artistic movement became, entwined with the social and political currents of the time.
Right, because Romanticism wasn't just about pretty poems and passionate love stories. It was a whole way of looking at the world, full of emotion, individuality, and fascination with national identity.
Exactly. And in Hungary, which was still under Habsburg rule at the time, that yearning for freedom and a distinct national identity was, especially powerful.
So it's like Romanticism gave Hungarian artists this powerful language to express their desires for an independent Hungary, both politically and culturally.
Precisely. Think of those brooding heroes you often find in Hungarian Romantic literature. They often embodied this struggle against oppression, this yearning for, a liberated Hungary. And the emphasis on folk traditions and national history, that directly taps into this need to define and celebrate, a uniquely Hungarian identity.
It's almost like art became a form of resistance, a way to push back against the status quo and imagine a different future.
Absolutely. And you see this same dynamic play out as we move from Romanticism to Realism in the late 19th century. Realism was all about portraying the world as it truly was, with all its social problems and struggles.
So a bit of a shift from those idealized romantic heroes and passionate love stories.
Exactly. And in Hungary, realism found a voice in writers who focused on the everyday lives of ordinary people, especially those grappling with poverty and social injustice.
This makes me think about those prominent Hungarian realist writers you mentioned earlier, Jókai Mór, Mikszáth, and Sigmund Móricz. Their work seems to reflect this desire to engage with the realities of Hungarian society, to shine a light on the challenges people were facing.
They were holding a mirror up to society, forcing people to confront these uncomfortable truths. And that's a powerful thing for art to do. But, let's rewind a bit. Even before Romanticism and Realism, back to the Renaissance. How did Hungary navigate that era of European cultural upheaval?
The Renaissance, that period of incredible artistic and intellectual explosion across Europe. But I know the Renaissance took a while to reach Hungary, didn't it?
It did. It really started to flourish during the reign of King Matthias Corvinus in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. He was a huge patron of the arts and sciences. And under his rule, Hungary saw this surge in humanist scholarship, architectural marvels inspired by Italian Renaissance styles, and a growing interest in classical literature and philosophy.
So it's like Hungary was catching the tail end of this Renaissance wave.
Yeah, but it's important to note that they weren't simply copying what was happening elsewhere. The Hungarian Renaissance had its own unique flavor. They blended these new European influences with their existing cultural traditions.
Makes sense. This makes me think of the printing press and its impact during this time. It revolutionized the spread of knowledge across Europe, and I imagine it must have had a significant impact on Hungarian culture as well.
Absolutely. The printing press arrived in Hungary around the mid-15th century. And it was a game changer. It made books more accessible, fueled the spread of humanist ideas, and it made it possible to translate classical texts into Hungarian.
So not only was the printing press spreading new ideas, but it was also helping to develop the Hungarian language itself.
Exactly. And with the rise of the Reformation in the 16th century, there was even greater emphasis on using vernacular languages, including Hungarian, for religious texts and literature.
Did this focus on the Hungarian language contribute to a stronger sense of national identity during the Renaissance?
Absolutely. As more and more works were written and printed in Hungarian, it solidified a shared culture and identity, distinguishing them from the broader European landscape. It's fascinating how these technological and social changes, the printing press, the Reformation, intertwined with the artistic and intellectual currents of the Renaissance. They all played a part in shaping this, unique Hungarian cultural tapestry. But as we move forward, we enter the Baroque era, a period that had a profound impact on Hungary.
Okay, back to the Baroque. We've already met Zrínyi and Pázmány, but what else can you tell us about this era in Hungary?
Well, the Baroque was a time of drama, grandeur, and intense emotion. And this aesthetic permeated everything from architecture and art to literature. Remember those ornate churches we talked about earlier? Overflowing with gold, intricate details. That's the Baroque in a nutshell.
It's a style that certainly makes a statement.
It does. And in Hungarian Baroque literature, you see this same grandeur, this exploration of extreme emotions and religious themes.
We've already discussed Zrínyi and Pázmány, but were there any other key figures who embodied this Hungarian Baroque spirit?
Well, going back to the point about how the Hungarian identity started to shift towards a more Magyar-focused sense of national identity, this was really driven by social and political forces at play within the Kingdom of Hungary.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just a literary trend. What were some of the factors that pushed this shift towards a stronger Magyar identity?
Well, keep in mind that the Kingdom of Hungary was multi-ethnic. You had Hungarians, Slovaks, Romanians, Germans, and others, all living within its borders. But as the 18th century progressed, there was a growing sense among some intellectuals that what unified them wasn't just their shared geography, but their shared Magyar language and heritage.
It sounds like there was a movement to define Hungarianness more narrowly, focusing on those who shared the Magyar language and culture.
Right, and this wasn't just happening in a vacuum. Across Europe, you were seeing the rise of nationalism. The French Revolution, with its emphasis on liberty, equality, fraternity, had a ripple effect. People were starting to identify more strongly with their nation, their language, their culture. And in Hungary, this played out in the realm of literature, with a growing emphasis on Magyar language works as the defining element of Hungarian literature.
So it's like this broader European trend of nationalism was filtering into Hungary and impacting how they define their own national identity.
Exactly, and this shift had a lasting impact, shaping how Hungarian literature and culture developed in the 19th and 20th centuries. It's another example of how Hungary absorbed these outside influences, adapted them, and made them their own.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the Renaissance and the arrival of the printing press to the rise of nationalism and the shift towards a more Magyar-focused definition of Hungarian literature. It's amazing to see how all these threads intertwine to create this unique and complex cultural tapestry. But before we move on, I have to ask about something we touched upon earlier, that surprising linguistic connection between Hungarian and Finnish.
Ah, yes, that always catches people off guard.
It does. So remind us, how are these two languages, spoken in such different parts of Europe, related?
It all comes down to language families. Hungarian belongs to the Finno-Ugric family of languages, which means it's related to Finnish and Estonian, as well as a number of less spoken languages in Russia and Siberia.
Wow, that's a vast geographical spread.
It is, and it speaks to these ancient migrations and cultural connections that we often don't think about. Scholars discovered this link by noticing similarities in basic vocabulary and grammar between these languages.
So it's like a linguistic puzzle, with clues scattered across time and space. And by piecing those clues together, they uncovered this fascinating connection.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even seemingly distant cultures can have these surprising links, hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected we all are, even across these vast distances and cultural differences. But speaking of connections, we've been talking about how European trends influenced Hungarian culture, but how did Hungary, in turn, contribute to the broader European cultural landscape?
That's a great question. Hungary's influence might be a little subtler than some of the major European powers, but it's definitely there. For instance, think about music. Hungarian folk music, with its distinctive rhythms and melodies, has had a huge impact on classical composers like Franz Liszt, Johannes Brahms, Béla Bartók.
Oh, that's right. I remember learning about Liszt's Hungarian rhapsodies. They're so full of energy and passion. You can really hear those Hungarian folk influences.
Exactly. And Bartók, a Hungarian composer himself, took those folk influences and wove them into his incredibly innovative, modernist compositions. He was pushing the boundaries of music, but those Hungarian roots were always present.
It's amazing how a culture's music can travel across borders and inspire artists in completely different genres and styles. But what about Hungarian literature? Did that have any impact beyond Hungary's borders?
It did, though it often took time for Hungarian writers to gain recognition on the international stage. One example is the poet Attila József, who we discussed earlier. His work wasn't widely translated until after World War II, but once it was, it resonated deeply with readers around the world.
Why do you think that is? What was it about József's work that connected with people from such different backgrounds?
Well, his themes are pretty universal, longing, alienation, the search for meaning in a chaotic world. These are universal human experiences, and József expressed them with such raw honesty and emotional depth. His poetry transcends language and cultural barriers.
It's a reminder that great art, no matter where it comes from, has the power to move and connect us on a deeply human level. But as we wrap up our deep dive, I'm curious, what do you think the future holds for Hungarian culture? How will it continue to evolve in this ever-changing world?
That's a fascinating question. If history is any guide, I think Hungarian culture will continue to embrace that dynamic tension between absorbing global influences and staying true to its unique identity. I'm particularly excited to see how younger generations of Hungarian artists and writers will navigate this interplay.
Yeah, like that river metaphor we talked about earlier. Hungarian culture, like the Danube, is constantly flowing, changing, adapting to the landscape, but it's always carving its own path.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so captivating. So, to our listener, I would say this: stay curious about Hungarian culture. Explore its art, its music, its literature. You might be surprised by what you discover.
And remember, the story of Hungarian culture is still being written, so keep exploring, keep learning. Those aha moments coming. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Our podcast discussions are based on our ebook, Hungary's Hall of Fame in a Nutshell. History, literature, art, music, science, sport. Scan the QR code or check the link in the description to download your copy of Hungary's Hall of Fame in a Nutshell. As a special bonus, you'll also receive the Illustrated Companion, featuring over 100 detailed illustrations to visually enrich your understanding of the book's content. Thank you for watching.